Okay, that's a new one. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Facts Tell Story Sell. And tonight we're going to interview, or Faith Burkowski is going to interview uh, Kaitlyn Beleckas. And I know that underneath her name it says Faith Burkowski, but we do have Kaitlyn Beleckas here to tell her story. It's always an adventure with us here at Facts Tell Story Cell or any of our live events. We just never know what will happen, but somehow we land here, and we're very glad to tell stories tonight. And this is a really important one, and I'm looking forward to hearing it because I do think it's the most common one. And it's when your child finally gets an IEP and you think they're getting the help they needed, and you're so relieved because finally there's a plan in place, but then they're not progressing and their reading doesn't seem to be moving forward. And this is so common, and it's really terrifying, especially as kids move into the upper grades. And several of us have been there. And, I was there too, Kaitlyn, and luckily we've had a happy ending. And today you're here to tell your story, and you had a positive ending too, thanks to the Faith Burkowski, the first. And so I'm going to check, I'm going to check out now and let the two of you talk, and then I'm going to come on at the end for some summaries. And so thank you for being here to tell your story.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Marion. So there's always an adventure when we're getting started. First, Kaitlyn had trouble getting on, and now there are two Faith Borkowskis up there. But yeah, I'd like everyone to really know your name. So it's Kaitlyn Beleckas. Yeah. And Kaitlyn is a parent who I'm still working with for a year now. And we decided to ask Kaitlyn on because we really wanted to hear from a parent who was willing to talk about her experiences, having a child who struggled for, years. And a lot of times we talk about the younger ones when we're talking about intervention, children in kindergarten, first, second. But we really want to focus tonight on the older student. And there are a lot of parents out there who really want to hear your story. So I want to just get started. Kaitlyn, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and tell us about yourself too?
Sure. So yeah, I have two children. I have a son who's in 7th grade, and then I have my daughter who is in 5th grade currently. She's the one we're going to be speaking about tonight. She's my struggling reader, and or I should say she's definitely made some fantastic gains this year, which has been incredible to watch. But it was interesting. It started at a very young age. I remember her preschool teacher coming up to me at the end of her preschool career and saying to me, she's like, I just want to give you the heads up, something is not fully coming together with, her letters, rhyming. And she said, I definitely want you to keep an eye on that next year. And I would suggest evaluating her in kindergarten. So we did. We actually started very young. We kept an eye on her in kindergarten. After the holidays, come January, February, my husband and I were both like, I think, we should have an evaluation done. She definitely didn't know all the letters of the alphabet yet. And, to some degree, it is so hard to tell at that age, because I know sometimes kids, all of a sudden it clicks in 1st grade and they're able to start putting everything together. But, since I had gotten that concern from the preschool teacher from the get-go, I felt like it was worthwhile looking into. So we did, and she received some services. She had an IEP at the end of kindergarten. First grade came, just still the same struggles. They added more services. Still did not see much progress. Second grade came, she was in an integrated class. And, at that point, she had a very significant IEP. She was in resource room, reading support, speech, and it just was not clicking. And then we went into third grade, and third grade for her was a little bit of an interesting year. She didn't start in September because she had open heart surgery in the middle of all of this. And then she came back to school in October, and we were kind of just at that point, we were at a loss. We did not know what to do. There was no progress being made. And at that point, they start the Wilson Reading Program. And so they started that with her mid-year in third grade. And again, it just, nothing seemed to be clicking with the program. And then we made a really, really tough decision for her. She ended up being held back or retained for third grade, and they moved her building. And I mean, as a parent, we always make decisions for our children, with the best of, in their best interests. And that really, really was a very tough decision. I tell you all the time, I'm like, I still don't know if it was the right one. It really was a very tough decision. But we moved schools. We're not looking back. Again, her second year of third grade, still doing Wilson, very limited progress. And then fourth grade, the pandemic hit mid-year. And actually right before, I had seen you at one of your conferences in October, and I was just so amazed at what you said, and just it just really stuck with me. And I remember calling you and just going over my concerns. And then you were able to take Reagan's case that summer. And since then, we've made such significant progress. And she's, I would say, pretty close to grade level at this point with her reading.
So I have so many questions for you, because I try to get into what the audience might be thinking right now. And first, I want to just mention, you also have an education degree.
Yes.
And I think that's something to bring up, that, we're both educators, and nobody really taught us correctly. I've told my followers many times that I did not know how to teach reading. I have, an elementary ed degree, special ed degree, reading degree, and everything I really learned along the way was going outside of my graduate school program.
Right.
So I want to tell parents this, because a lot of parents beat themselves up over this. As you were saying, what should I do? Am I making the right decision?
Mm-hmm.
And here, even with a degree in education, we still have those same concerns. So, so you could only imagine somebody who does not know any of the education lingo, how those parents must be feeling. And then you add on financial difficulties, and perhaps families that do not have time to really look into this, because they could be working 2 jobs, 3 jobs.
Absolutely.
It's just so unfair. It really is. But I want to start asking you some questions, because I'm sure this is what people are wondering.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Wilson program.
Correct.
And one thing I always tell people parents say, I want Wilson, I want Orton Gillingham. These are the programs I want. You got Wilson,
Right.
and yet it was not working.
No.
So why do you think it did not work at the school level? I have some of my own thoughts, but I'd like to hear what you think.
So I think there are two parts to this. I think the first is in terms of Wilson in the school. I don't know Wilson that much. Like I've seen some of the books come home, but to me, it just looks like, honestly, like just words, random words on a page. And I'm like, what's the pattern here? What am I trying to work on? Because I've never been trained in Wilson. So I think part of it is there's like a parent training component. And I also think that sometimes the kids are, I mean, personally, based on her experience, I think she was moved through a program very quickly, and information might not have been reinforced after working with you, because I see what program you're providing, Reagan, because it's also parent coaching. I know exactly what the goals are weekly, and I know exactly the skills that we're working on. And I additionally have to follow through with that every night. So even if it's just for 15 minutes, depending on the type of day we've had, we are still reinforcing those skills every week.
Yeah, so I definitely think that there are a couple of things. Number one, I think that there's a disconnect between what goes on in the mainstream classroom and what goes on when kids are pulled out. And then even special education, they get confusing messages where they should be using a specialized program, but they still want to do the same strategies that the mainstream classroom uses, such as cueing and leveled books. So they try to bridge this the best that they could.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, look, I'm Wilson certified. So I do know that Wilson can work and does work for some students. I feel many times it does not work for a number of reasons. Number one, what I just mentioned, that the kids are getting mixed messages.
Right.
And so you could have a really good program and it's evidence-based, and yet there are these messages that teachers hear from their schooling and the pressure that perhaps that they get from just the overall feeling in the school that they should be using leveled books, they should be using the cueing and posters that have Skippy Frog and whatever those are, all the little animals that tell you to skip words or to look at a picture. And then they're also doing explicit instruction. So the kid is left wondering, well, what do I really do?
I agree. And especially for her, they did use level literacy instruction in the classroom, and then we're providing Wilson, and they're not similar at all. So that definitely could be confusing. And I think the other thing that was lost with her, I don't know at what point that this happened, but and you saw it immediately with her. She didn't have the early skills. She didn't have the short vowel sounds. She didn't know vowel teams. She had a couple of skills like her endings, like the ing, the ed, but she didn't have any of the beginning skills. So if you don't have those foundations, you can't build from that at all.
Right. So this is something, and I think it's the nature of how schools are set up. So this is not about blaming a person or
Absolutely.
anybody. So we want to just make that clear.
Right.
That what I find is, parents are told your child is at step 3, 4, 5.
Right.
And then when I really do an assessment, I'm saying, oh no, I never would have placed this child here. And not to say that it wasn't done,
Right.
but I think teachers feel this pressure to have to get through something. So
Right.
it's either the child is rushed, and I see it goes both ways,
Right.
either rushed and the foundation is not set, or they could stay at step 1 and they'll get married at step 1.
Right, right.
Right.
They all have the best intentions. The teachers want to see progress. So yeah, it's not a fault thing. You know, they honestly, I all her teachers have tried with her. And like I said, something just got very lost in the beginning with her. And
And I think what you said about parent training,
yes, it's huge.
when I work with children, I encourage all parents to sit in on the session because I expect there to be daily practice.
Right.
In school, there should be somebody who does this reinforcement other than the teacher, whether it's a teaching assistant, an aide, I don't care who does it, a volunteer, someone who's going to listen to the child, read aloud, and begin doing proper error correction and giving feedback. And you see, if you're taught, it's easy enough to do. It's just a matter of doing it. These kids who struggle, especially the older kids, they do not get enough practice. And I think that from what I've seen over the years, that you could have this IEP, and that's another thing. You know, everybody fights for the IEP. They want what they want on the IEP. And then they're disappointed many times when they see, look, I have this IEP, but my kid is still very far behind. The
Right.
gap is not closing here. And I think it's because we're trying to rush them through, or we assume they have it, and it's just not going into long-term memory.
Right.
And I don't think learning theory is stressed enough, that the way we learn requires lots and lots of practice. And for a struggling reader, it's 10 times, 100 times more than a typical student. So, you know, I think there are a lot of reasons why kids get to a certain point and they start to feel hopeless.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the emotional side of this. Not just from your daughter's point of view, but it's emotional for you too. This is draining on the whole family.
Oh, it's exhausting. And yeah, for her, school had become extremely stressful. She didn't, right before the school closure in March, she was very unhappy attending school. She would have a lot of stomach aches, you know, all those like typical signs of stress in a child when they don't want to attend school. For me, it was extremely emotional because I felt like I was trying everything and nothing was working. And I was like, my thought was, I don't know how to help this kid, how to help her. How do I help her with this? And I felt helpless with the situation. And even when we started with you, you know, because we had to go back to very early skills. And so a lot of it was, she would tell me that she felt like this was babyish. She's 11 years old. I don't want to do this. I'm not a baby. Same thing. I would pull out the decodable readers after our practice, and same thing. These are babyish books. I don't want to read this. So I think it was in October, like we were still adjusting to the school year this year, and everything just with school was so different. And she just had a week where every time I tried to work with her, she was so resistant to the help. And I was speaking to my husband. I'm like, do I just pull her from this? Like, this is so hard right now. And it's so hard to be a mom and a teacher and her biggest cheerleader through all this. You just have to wear, like, you wear so many hats as a parent to begin with. And it's always difficult to teach our own children. I think a lot of parents felt that this year in general. And parents who have children with learning disabilities, that was, I think, even tougher.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this year was impossible, right?
Yeah.
But I want to stress to the people out there that you and I never did this work in person.
No.
This was
All
entirely
Zoom.
on Zoom.
Yes.
And the whole year, we started in the summer during the pandemic uh, doing this. And we made more progress this year than she made in her whole school career doing this on Zoom. And I think people are wondering how. Like, what did we do? And, you know, what I do with all my students, they want to know. And I want to go back to what you said about starting from the beginning.
Yeah.
I am nuts when it comes to foundation.
Yeah.
Nuts. And so if I see the foundation is not there,
Yeah.
we will spend time going over and over those same things until it's automatic.
Yeah.
And my feeling is you have to take 10 steps back before you can move forward. If it's not right, it's not right.
Yeah.
And yes, you know, an 11-year-old doesn't want to start relearning how to form letters.
Yeah.
It's painful. It is painful.
Yeah.
However, when you start forming the letters correctly and saying the sound simultaneously, we start to make that connection that goes into long-term memory.
Yeah.
Everything is about automaticity.
Yes.
And I think people don't understand that in order to have fluency in reading, you need to be automatic at the sub skills. And so every one of our sessions, your daughter's writing a lot, right? And then during the week, every day, the practice requires writing and saying sounds, writing the words besides reading. There's a lot of writing, spelling, and reading going together.
Yeah.
And I think that for some people, they want there to be a quick fix.
Right.
But it does move faster when you get the foundation right.
Absolutely, because as soon as she got that foundation and we got the letter formation, the vowel teams, she all of a sudden it just started to click, like right after the holidays this year. And her confidence was building, because for her, a lot of this had become a confidence issue. I think she almost had given up on the fact that she would be able to read. I don't think she even thought that would happen at this point. And I think the biggest change in her was the conversation that you had with her. I think it was in the early fall, and you said to her, "I'm not giving up on you. You can do this." And I think that really stuck with her. I think she really felt that you wanted to help, that people cared, and we were going to make this work. And you did explain to her, because she is an 11-year-old, it's going to be really, really hard, but you can do this. And
Yeah.
it stuck with her.
Right. And, you know, I think that many parents are ready to run quickly when they see their kids are struggling. It's like too painful.
Yes.
And what I try to tell parents really is you gotta just tell them that I'm in this with you.
Right.
This is hard for me to watch you struggle. It's not pleasurable. I'm not even the mom here.
Right.
I but I get emotional over this. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's draining for me to watch when a kid is struggling. But you have to, I hate the expression buck up, but you got to buck up
Right.
and just say, okay, we're in this and we have to do this. This is important. You can do it. And I think today a lot of parents, they want to be, I hate to say it, the friend, right? They're afraid of their kids hating them. Like, your kid is not going to hate you.
Right.
When you turn around and your kid is getting past that point, they're going to remember that forever. It's that point of saying, well, I'm mom. I don't want to be teacher too.
Yeah.
I get that. But whoever said that being a parent isn't teaching also? It is.
Yeah.
It is. And so, yes, it's the school's responsibility, but if it's not happening there, then you got to step in. And as long as we stick with it, now your daughter has a lesson for life, perseverance. That she'll have forever. That she knows when you stick to something, it works. You just stick with it. And as long as you're on the right track, it's hard, but you can do it. That's a life lesson.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and she sees it. She definitely saw it this year. Actually, speaking about perseverance too, her reading teacher this year, because she was getting like a double dose of reading all year, and her teacher gave her a bracelet, like a little like charm. It was a bumblebee, and said it's for perseverance, because she said that is the quality that you have. You worked through something that was really, really hard.
Yes.
And yeah, she did fantastic this year. It's really and back to her confidence too. I used to, talk to Reagan in the house, and she would talk to me, and sometimes I'd be like, Reagan, you got to speak up. Like, I can't hear you. Can you speak louder? And I felt so bad, because I'd always be like, you have to speak up. You have to speak up. And since she has started reading, I don't ask her that anymore. It's her confidence has just changed completely through this process. And, I know sometimes when we're on our calls, she's not always speaking loud enough, because I still think with the new skills, it is still building that confidence. But now with just generalizing things, she feels so much more comfortable talking, having a conversation. She read her first novel this year, which was fantastic and so exciting. They wrote to the author, and she wrote back to them. So yeah, it's a lot of work, I think, especially like you said, at this older age, but seeing the results now has been really amazing.
Yeah, so you said something about having that inaudible voice, and your daughter's not the only one. Trust me, that mumbling stuff happens all the time. It's a way to make the adult wonder if they're saying the right answer or not. Like, you have to figure it out. Because, how many times could they take being wrong, right? So you understand where some of that low mumbling stuff comes from. And once they feel, oh yeah, I can do this. All of a sudden they find their voices, but that's a very common thing when kids lack confidence to really speak in a low voice and to mumble a bit. So I'm sure there are parents who are nodding right now. I'm sure of it. I've worked with many kids, so I know that's true.
Right.
So let's talk about the IEP, okay? Because some parents are wondering, did the goals reflect what was needed to start moving her up? Or do you realize now that maybe the goals were not as specific or as measurable as needed? I don't know if I said that correctly.
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, I had actually stopped looking at the goals because I was just so defeated by the whole process. I'm like, all right, if we can do X, Y, and Z 3 times, I'm like, it really means nothing to me because I can't get her to read anything right now. So I'm just like, the goals, I don't know, like, I guess, like you said, they didn't align, and then they just kept adding stuff and, adding more support, adding more tech pieces, which the tech piece, I think it has its place, but assistive technology can only do so much, like if you can't decipher the stuff, it's not gonna help you. So that was a frustration also. A lot of assistive technology was put in place, and I don't think if you have the skills, that will help. That's just my honest opinion about that.
Yeah, no, Kaitlyn, so you said a couple of things there. All right. So let's make it clear because this is something I tell everybody.
Yeah,
More is not better.
correct.
More is not better. What's better is starting to pull out what does not work.
Right.
And schools, for the most part, refuse to do that.
Right.
They rather add in, oh, we'll get a phonemic awareness program. Oh, we'll get a phonics program. But don't take away my guided reading. Don't take away my Fontes and Pinnell,
Yeah.
cueing and all that stuff. We'll just keep adding on.
Right.
And what I'm saying that I hope we're getting across here is I told you one of the most important things that we do is to stop doing what does not work and what can hurt your daughter. So, one thing I'm going to tell parents out there, rather than just ask for Orton Gillingham or Wilson or any program,
Right.
start with pulling out what doesn't work, that will not be used because that just waters everything else down. Right. And it just confuses the children.
Right.
So you mentioned AT, right? So the tech piece gets to be more important as they get older. So right now at Reagan's age, and starting middle school, junior high school,
Right.
it starts to become more important, right?
Right.
But there are these kids who don't even know keyboarding. How is it faster to take one finger and tap out a word than it is to learn how to write?
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me. More time should be spent, even if it requires lots and lots of time every day, making sure that handwriting is functional. Doesn't have to be beautiful handwriting, but it has to be functional. I'm left-handed. I do not have a beautiful handwriting, but it's functional. It is what it is. But these kids are going up to 4th, 5th, 6th. They can't write. They can't hold a pencil. They can't think of their message because they're so busy wondering how to form a letter or what letters to write. And then they just kind of dumb down their own writing. They just can't do it. So more is not better. And technology has limited use and a beneficial use in these early grades. We should not be jumping to tech really until much later. We really need to set the foundation with sounds, letters, handwriting, all the basics.
Right. Yeah, because if you can't match the sound to the letter on the keyboard, that's not going to be that helpful for them either. So yeah, it's definitely about starting with those foundations and going back and constantly reviewing them. So I mean, when Reagan is in a session with you, I'm sitting on the side and I'm taking notes, and I know you notice things, and then I notice things, and I'm like, ooh, she's struggling still with that sound. I'm going to go back and go through my notes and review that with her, because sometimes certain skills that she learned in the beginning need to be repeated again.
Yeah,
of course.
Right.
Yeah,
You have to go back. There's a lot of cyclical review. Now, if a parent doesn't know any of this, even if they want to help, how could they?
Yeah.
So you and I talked about this parent training piece, and which parents get from me just while I tutor. It's a parent training. It's, I'm working with the parent and the child at the same time. And I always did. Pre-pandemic, this was how I worked. But I do think that the schools think, you know what? The parents are better off just making sure there are books in the home and reading to children. And they think that that's enough, that parents only could handle reading aloud and making sure there are books or making sure the kids do their homework. Right. What are your thoughts? I give parents more credit, that if they knew, they could really be helping kids way more. And not to say that every family could do this, but then we have to find those people who could, if the parents can't, whether it's volunteers or teaching assistants or aides, or I don't care who does it.
Right. Yeah, I really felt very uninformed about her reading disability. I could not speak to it. I just was like, she can't break down sounds. You spoke about that education piece. Even as an educator, we do not get that training. So I was very intimidated by the diagnosis. I didn't know a lot. And then when people would talk to me, they're like, oh, that's a diagraph. That's, different words that are more of like the reading, dialogue, lingo, yes, that you use. And so I would sit in a meeting and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I felt very uninformed. And, since this year and working, like you said, getting that coaching piece, I think that's very important to parents, because I think parents want to feel empowered and feel like they can help. Because I honestly I felt like I didn't know how to help her. And this year I'm having conversations with people and I feel extremely informed. I know exactly what she's working on. I know what she still needs in areas of improvement. So I think parent training would be so beneficial to parents. And even, in terms of schools with reinforcing it at home, just give 15 minutes. I mean, I'm sure some teachers do that, but just like, just a little bit of repetitive work at home to reinforce those skills.
Right. But part of this is knowing how knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And I think that that should be part of every school district initiative. You know, we talk about this science of reading, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of posts. I'm sure you're in groups, so you follow some of this. So everything is SOR, you know, science of reading. I hate that term, to be honest, because I think it intimidates people.
Okay.
Oh, the science of reading. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't do that. And I just want to say it's common sense. It's
Yeah.
common sense. Just open your mind to just getting rid of everything else that you thought you knew. And once you open up your mind and you realize, wait a minute, every other discipline, karate, you know, and I mention this all the time, you don't become a black belt overnight.
Right.
You start off building skills, foundation, right? If you are a musician, I remember my son having to do scales on a piano, you know, warming up his fingers, making sure that his wrists were up. You know, that's how, if you're classically trained, there's a way you hold your fingers by the piano. My daughter took art lessons, and she would stay on a painting for weeks and weeks and weeks, and she would get tired of it, saying, I just want to be done with this painting. And I would say, well, that's part of the learning. Your teacher is trying to show you something. You have to be patient. I guess what I'm trying to bring out is I don't care if it's a sport, music, art, anything that we learn starts with building blocks.
Yes.
I don't know why in education we feel we have to start off with critical thinking. What are they thinking about? You have to have some knowledge to engage in critical thinking.
Right.
That's the job of elementary school. Right there is to build a foundation so that these kids can think critically, read strategically, write coherently. You can't write coherently unless you can write a sentence, you know, and yet we're expecting them to write essays. They can't
even start
together. And, you know, or reading and having all these ideas that they have to put together, and yet they can't lift the words up off the page.
Right.
So, you know, it blows my mind that we have to call it this science of reading. Yes, there's research behind it. Yes, I get all that. But really, it's not that difficult if we start from the beginning and we take away what doesn't work and we focus on what does work. It's really that simple. It's not easy for a child, but the logic of it is that simple.
Absolutely.
You know, so I have just a couple of more questions for you. So it's very interesting to me about expectations. You mentioned that before when I said to Reagan, you know, this is hard, but you will read. Not that I think you will. No, you will, you know, because that's just the way it's going to be. You will read. And having these high expectations. Did you feel as though at a certain point the school was getting a little bit tired of you, you know, asking for certain things? Did you feel like they were thinking, oh my goodness, this mom here she goes again?
Well, I would email them.
What do they want? You know, like, you know, this kid, I don't know, we've done all we could, just forget about it.
Yeah.
You know?
At some point I did feel that way. I felt like they did get to a point where they were like, you know what, there might be some kids that might not read and your child might be one of them. And I mean, to some extent, I started to believe that. I was like, I guess she's not going to be able to learn how to read, and she's going to need to depend on a lot of technology to get by. And that was very that was really tough to hear. I felt extremely defeated for her because, you know, for an 11-year-old, now they have cell phones. All they want to do is send text messages. She doesn't want me to read them for her so she knows what her friend is saying. She wants to be able just to text her friends and have a conversation with them. And for a while, she would show me text messages and be like, Mom, what did my friends say to me? And that was really tough to see because, you know, I think she felt like she didn't have her independence, and again, being a tween, her privacy, you know, just wanting to talk to them. So yeah, I do feel like to some extent that I I did email them a lot, and like you said, they probably were very frustrated with me because I would give them books to maybe research or articles about it. And you know, I think because it seems I think it seems harder than it really is. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but when I saw how reading was being taught to her this year, I was like, this isn't difficult to do. It's just time and a lot of repetition. That's what it is. And it can be done, just it's tiring. It is tiring, but it's just a lot of continuous review, repetition. And when I said it to you, I'm like, this seems simple. Like, I don't know if it's just because it makes sense now knowing it and I'm involved. I don't know.
Well, couple of things. I think that when you understand something deeply, it starts to make sense, right? So if you just are doing surface level stuff and not really getting deep enough, then it feels overwhelming. But when you really understand something, when it's, you know, and that's what I try to do. I try to get across to parents. No, really, this is something, if you understand it, you're both working on this together.
Right.
It actually brings you closer. You know, what parents are so worried about, oh, I don't want to be that mom, you know. No, this is something she'll remember forever, that you spent this time helping her.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, she will.
And she does feel empowered. I told you the story too with her older brother, and he didn't know how to spell a word. And I was like, okay, Reagan, this is the word. If we were to like say it in our regular speaking voice, it's doctor. But if we use our spelling voice, it would sound more like doctor. For him. And she spelled it for him. And she does. She felt very empowered because she now has those skills.
Right, right. And, you know, I do think that we want to just get across that the teachers working with Reagan all wanted the best for her.
Absolutely.
And this is certainly not about teachers or school district. This is, I think what we're doing is talking about a way of thinking that really needs to change in every district across the country.
Absolutely.
That we really, you know, this is not an isolated case. We're trying to bring out that this happens everywhere. And so I think the parents out there, if we're talking about goals, and we're talking, because I want to wrap up, if we're talking about what you could walk away with from here, if you have an IEP And the goals are such that they're talking about generalities with level books or that kind of thing. That's never going to help. You have to pare down and get down to the underlying skills and have a goal for every skill that's missing.
Right.
There is no number that says, oh, well, you could only have 3 goals. No, break it down further. Break it down until you really see where the missing pieces are. And the goals should be ambitious.
Yeah.
Not where, you say, okay, we'll go this far and put a cap on because it's realistic. If I went by what was realistic for Reagan, we would be doing this for another 3 years. I don't believe in that word realistic. We work as hard as we could.
Yes.
And there's a sense of urgency. So you make the goals ambitious, but you make them very, very specific, getting into what I call like micro skills, really paring it down if you're going to have an IEP.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, there's no reason that there can't be a goal that a speech teacher, a speech pathologist picks up and helps out with some of this, with phonemic awareness. There is no reason that there can't be other people working in a team to do this, because I do believe in a team approach. Anytime I'm working with a parent, there's a team approach, because it does take a village. Yep. I really do believe if we're going to get these kids up, especially the older kids, they're so many years behind. The only way we could close a gap is to have lots of hands-on practice, lots of people understanding what to do, how to do it, doing it often, practicing a lot. It's the only way that we're going to catch these kids up, even getting close to grade level. Because if you look at a year of progress in a year, they'll always be behind. You can't do that. You have to always think, no, I have to get 2 to 3 years of progress in a year. It's very hard for one teacher to do that herself or himself. You need some support, you need help. So I want to leave this with the idea that, there should be some type of parent training. There should be possibly TAs, aides, volunteers. Now with the COVID relief money, adding in extra people for that practice and training them how to practice with these kids to get that repetition is very, very important. And I think that the message for parents really is, don't just ask for a program. You have to really understand what you're asking about. You have to have some idea. You buy a car. You don't just walk into a dealership and say, oh, show me the new model. You do your research. Yeah. People will research cars more than they will about what's being taught in school. It's time parents start looking at this saying, you know what? I have to do my research here. I have to understand this, to have at least some basic level so that I can advocate for my child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very important.
Yeah. Well, Kaitlyn, I just want to thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was very brave, because a lot of parents don't want to talk about this. And yet I know there are a ton of parents out there very thankful that there is someone coming forward talking about this. You mentioned about, making that decision to retain There are lots of parents in that same boat. And, you know, I always say this, an extra year of doing the same thing, I don't know, for some it can, I guess, work, especially for the younger kids, maybe, you know, but, you know, retaining isn't always the answer,
No.
but that doesn't mean you should feel guilty. No looking back, we look ahead. You also mentioned, you know, special ed, self-contained, or inclusion. Those are questions that people wonder about. Should I put my kid in a self-contained class? Is an integrated class the right thing? People have so many questions, and there's no one right answer, right? There really is no one right answer. But I do want to leave people with this. Special education programs, you know, self-contained. If you look at the numbers, it's not very promising. You know, if you really look at the numbers there, they're not really solving this problem. The problem really starts in tier 1, mainstream education, when kids first enter kindergarten. And then those special ed programs and all that extra help should follow what the mainstream is doing, as long as they're doing explicit, systematic, structured literacy.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, Kaitlyn, thank you so much. It was so nice
thank
having you on. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Let's see if Marion is still on or if she went to sleep. I don't think so. There she is.
Okay, I'm here. I don't see myself, but as long as you see me, I'm not sure whether I'm showing up. I just want to say this was incredible information. I think this was the most valuable Facebook Live for a wide audience. I learned a lot. I could have asked 10 questions myself. It was very hard to sit and listen. And this is so timely and really so informative. I mean, even as now the summer vacations have started and so many parents are wondering about, are their kids going to slide further? And not all kids have the option of tutors over the summer, and where do I begin and how do I approach this? And just so much of this advice going back to the beginning and taking 10 steps back to take one step forward, and looking at what isn't working in assistive technology, because I mean, there were years that we fought for it, and then suddenly a tide turned and our kids were getting overwhelmed with it before they were ready and before anyone was really taking a good hard look at how it was being used. And I mean, I think that you really provided so much good advice tonight, and we could probably continue with a little series here, but I hope that everybody listening at least feels encouraged that if they have an older child that's struggling, they are going to learn to read. I really believe that. And if you listen tonight, you have a place to start, and you have some your knowledge has increased, where you have an idea of what you can work on. And I mean, you covered the emotional issues and the issues that parents go through. And so I can't thank you both enough. This really was just brilliant and helpful and real, and you know, what valuable information. So thank you both.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Good night.